Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Comic Kid here, and today we will be discussing the best places to start with Batman. Now, for a character like Batman, who has such a long, extended history with reboots here and there to his origin, it can be kind of confusing to pick up exactly, where you need to start with a character, and where to continue from there, and the goal of this video is to hopefully clarify and clear some of that up. Now, the first potential recommendation is Detective Comics New 52, Volume 1, Faces of Death, both written and illustrated by Tony S. Daniel. This is a newer, more recent release. That being said, it's not too new or anything. The thing about Detective Comics is it really sets up one of the major storylines in the Batman title, which is Death of the Family, and in this one, it mainly follows the Joker right after he removes his face. This is still a good place to start with Batman, although continuing on with the series, it's not the best. It has its moments depending on the arc, but regardless, Detective Comics Volume 1 is still a good place to start with the character. Now, another good place, one that I've actually already mentioned, is Batman Court of Owls here. This one is written by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. This one is another newer storyline. As you can see, it's got the New 52 tag right there. This is kind of the more definitive Batman run. A lot of people really enjoyed what Snyder and Capullo put out. It ended up going all the way to 52 issues. And it is one of the better Batman runs. I really enjoyed what Snyder put out. There were some lesser storylines, of course, but for the most part, he hit more than he missed. This storyline follows a group of all-new villains called the Court of Owls as they try attacking Gotham and Bruce Wayne, and it's a very personal, mind mystery detective story for Batman. So if you like that, if you like a good detective Batman story, this would be a great place for you to start. It goes all the way up to, I want to say 10 or 11 books. I ended up switching over to issues after some point, so I have most of the run. So if you like that kind of story, it does continue from here. And overall, it is a pretty good run. I do highly recommend it, especially if you're starting out as with Batman, and yeah. Now, as far as origin stories go, Batman has quite a few versions of his own origin. Each one is slightly different than the last. Some are canon, some are not. Some are really good, and some are definitely not as good. The first origin story we're going to talk about today is Batman Zero Year. Again, this is by Snyder and Capullo. This is book 4, or the start of volume 4 in their series. The graphic novel will have a different cover because I have the single issues for it, but this is a really, really good place to just kind of continue with Snyder's run kind of seamlessly into a retelling of Batman's origin. Snyder kind of expands on the lore of Batman in there. He kind of focuses a lot more on the transition from Bruce Wayne to Batman and from Batman to a symbol. And so if you're looking for a good long origin for him that kind of covers a lot of villains, the 0 Year run or story arc is going to be a really good place to start with an origin for him. Next up for origins, we have Batman Earth 1 by Jeff Johns and illustrated by Gary Frank. Now, this one is kind of controversial. Not a lot of people enjoy this. Personally, I enjoyed book 1, but not book 2. So it's really kind of a toss-up. The thing a lot of people didn't like about Earth 1 is changes to Bruce's family. I won't spoil it, obviously, but they do something, and I personally didn't mind. I thought it was actually kind of cool, but a lot of people had issues with it. Essentially, in this story, it's a retelling of how Bruce first comes to start off as Batman. It covers the shooting of the Waynes, it's got Penguin in there, and it introduces a new villain who is a little weaker, but for a detective story, it works, in my opinion. Earth One is another detective story. It actually works more detective into the origin than Snyder's origin does, but Snyder does tell like the better detective story overall. So again, this is an option. This one is not canon. The Snyder one is the current canon for Batman, but Earth One, anything Earth One, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, whatever, is all not canon. They're just kind of like fun side stories to offer differences to people who might want them. Then lastly, as far as origins go, we have Batman Year One by Frank Miller. For the longest time, this was the most popular origin story for Batman. It's actually more of a Jim Gordon story, almost. Batman's still in the book plenty, don't get me wrong, but the story does focus quite heavily on Jim Gordon, right as he's starting off at the GCPD. Basically, Bruce Wayne has just returned, and this mysterious Batman has started popping up, and it's about Gordon working the case. This book is great because it tells you everything you really need to know to get started with Batman. It covers a wide array of cast members, Jim Gordon, it covers the Falcone family, it shows you who Selina Kyle is, and it even served as the inspiration for Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins movie. A lot of what you see in this book is pulled almost straight from this book in Batman Begins. So if you've seen the movie and you like the movie, a lot of people look to Nolan's trilogy as the definitive Batman, and he pulls a lot from what Frank Miller does. This is a really good story. It is probably my favorite origin for Batman. That's a bit of a toss-up, and I guess it kind of just depends on what mood I'm feeling. But this is a really good place to start with the character, and this is typically what I recommend for people who are just starting out. Now, a lot of people often ask, okay, well, I've read this, I've read his origin, where do I go from here? And that can be pretty complicated as well. It's really just kind of a toss-up because you still want to transition from early days Batman into a modern Batman, but then you have to cover different things like, oh, this Robin, that Robin, this event, that event. So going specifically from the Year One story, the best recommendation would be to go to Batman The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. This is an early days Batman story. There's no Robin, but he's been Batman for about a year now or so. This book is kind of written as an indirect sequel to Year One, so there's that added bonus as well. Again, Christopher Nolan pulls a lot from this book for The Dark Knight. As you can see, it's even got a quote by him there. And this story follows Batman as he's trying to track down the Holiday Killer. Essentially, at the start of one Halloween, a serial killer is going around killing someone on each major holiday once a month. And as Batman's trying to find them, discover who they are, he's building relationships, he's getting betrayed, he's tearing down relationships. It's a really good story. It is kind of longer, but it's definitely worth the bang for your buck. And even as a standalone Batman story, it is excellent. From there, Long Halloween has a direct sequel called Batman Dark Victory. This is a great introduction to Dick Grayson, who is the first Robin, It is a continuation of the Holiday Killer storyline directly. And again, this is just a good Batman story. I don't recommend it as a standalone just because it does build so much off of Long Halloween, but the two books together are a really good, long Batman story. This cover here is a little outdated. There has been a newer print, but reading from Batman Year 1 to Long Halloween to this is going to be a really good place to get you a wide array of Batman characters and kind of catch you up on some Batman history. From Dark Victory, I would recommend jumping to A Death in the Family. Now, this is the death of Jason Todd's storyline, and so you would be skipping over a lot of Dick Grayson, early Jason Todd stuff, right to this. That being said, not a lot of Jason Todd stuff is in print, so it is going to be a little hard to track down. That being said, really the only difference or major thing that you would need to know is that Dick Grayson is no longer Robin and Jason Todd is. This story will kind of familiarize you or re-summarize Jason and his attitude and so on and so forth. The great thing about this copy is it also includes the Lonely Place of Dying storyline, which is the introduction to Tim Drake, who is the third Robin, and so this storyline altogether covers the death of one Robin, the introduction of another one, and that's mainly the appeal in Death in the Family. It is still a really good storyline, even for a reprint of like a classic older book, and just all around Death in the Family by Jim Starlin and Marv Wolfman is just a great Batman essential read. The next storyline I would recommend is Batman Knightfall. This is the famous story in which Bane shows up, breaks Batman's back, and Azrael, or Jean-Paul Valley, has to become Batman. This is a monster of a story. The recommended reading order from DC is Knightfall, Night Quest, Night's End, and these books are massive. There is a lot of story to cover in between. They've recently started reprinting them so that they're a little bit more bite-sized, easier to read, etc., etc. But what makes this such an essential Batman story is that it does cover a huge array of villains, and Knightfall through Night's End is just an essential Batman read. A lot of important stuff was going on at the time, and so if you read everything, great, you're caught up, but there is a lot of stuff that isn't quite necessary. But I would recommend at least reading all of Knightfall. Going from there, you can kind of get the gist of what happens with Azrael, or Batzrael as some people call him, leading into how Bruce ends up coming back as Batman. Well, once again, Christopher Nolan pulls a lot from this book, as seen in Dark Knight Rises. Now, the last book that I have for y'all as far as recommendations go is Batman Hush. Once again, this is by Jeff Loeb, who did Long Halloween and Dark Victory. This time the great Jim Lee is on the artwork. However, as you can see, his stuff is absolutely gorgeous. This is a more modern Batman book. I believe it came out in the mid-early 2000s or so. Essentially, it follows Batman as he's working the mystery of this new villain, Hush. And almost any time you see Hush in the comics, there's going to be a wide cast. You see everyone from Superman to a wide array of Batman villains. It even tells you who, like, Huntress is. So if you read Long Halloween and Dark Victory, you'll be familiar with a lot of characters in this. That being said, this is still an essential Batman story in my opinion. And even though the mystery is a little weak in this, it's still a great Batman story. A lot of what drives this is how Loeb chooses to portray Batman in this, and seeing him interact with everyone from Nightwing to Tim Drake Robin and so on and so forth. It's so interesting to see the dynamic between Batman and other people. This is also a major moment in Batman's relationship with Catwoman. If you're reading Tom King's Rebirth, he doesn't pull from this story necessarily, but he builds on a little bit of what Loeb establishes as well, as far as their relationship goes. And that's everything for today. Again, these are just kind of like recommended starting places with a base recommended reading order. There are definitely some gaps and some places to continue from, like Hush and so on, like Under the Red Hood would be another great one. But everything shown here today is gonna be great to get you caught up with the character. From there, you can kind of make decisions on what you liked about it or disliked about whatever story, and build your reading list from there. But that should be everything you need to really get started with Batman. And that's all we have for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see y'all next week.